The first meal the spaceport was never quiet. Engines roared, metal clanged, and loudspeakers called out departure times in dozens of alien languages. Evan Cross had learned to block out most of it, but not tonight. Something felt different. He was moving crates from the evening supply ship when he saw movement in the shadows between two storage bays. At first, he thought it was a stray dock animal. But then, a small, thin hand reached out, followed by a second, larger one pulling it back. He stopped. Two figures crouched behind the cargo bins. One was clearly an alien woman, tall but painfully thin, her clothes torn and wet from the cold mist drifting in from the landing pads. Her skin was a pale silver blue, and her eyes darted between the crowd and him like a cornered animal. Beside her was a little girl, no older than 8 by human years, clutching a dirty scrap of cloth like it was a shield. They weren't here by accident. They were hiding. Evan glanced around. Security drones hovered in the distance. If the wrong person saw them, they wouldn't last an hour. He'd seen it before. Vagrants removed by the spaceport enforcers, never to be seen again. The girl's stomach growled so loudly it made her flinch. The mother whispered something in a language Evan didn't understand, pulling the girl closer. Evan's hands tightened around the crate he carried. He had his own rules. Stay out of trouble. Don't get involved. Keep your head down. But there was something about the child's wide, hollow eyes that broke those rules in half. Set the crate down and knelt. Slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sealed ration pack, still warm from the station's canteen. He held it out, saying nothing. The mother tensed, her body curling around the girl. Her eyes narrowed, suspicion burning in them. She didn't move. But the little girl, she stared at the food like it was the sun itself. She took one small step forward, then another, until she was close enough to touch it. Her mother hissed something in warning, but the girl's tiny hand shot out, snatching the pack from Evan's grip. She tore it open with her teeth before her mother could stop her, stuffing the warm bread into her mouth. Evan watched her chew desperately, crumbs falling down her front. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just made sure no one else was looking. Eat, he said quietly. The mother's gaze locked on his face, searching for some hidden motive. Whatever she saw there made her relax just a little. She took the second half of the bread from her daughter's hands and gave Evan the faintest nod. Then footsteps. Heavy, echoing, getting closer. Evan's head snapped toward the sound. 2 security patrolmen were making their rounds. He cursed under his breath. Without thinking, he grabbed the mother's arm. Her muscles went rigid, but he didn't stop. He pulled her and the girl behind a tall stack of metal supply crates. The 3 of them crouched in the narrow space as the patrol passed just meters away. The men talked about their shift change, laughing about some drunk captain they'd arrested earlier. They didn't even notice the 3 figures hiding in the shadows. When they were gone, Evan let go of her arm. She stayed still for a moment, then slowly eased her daughter back into the darkness. He stood. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said simply. He didn't wait for a reply. He picked up his crate and walked away, his boots echoing on the wet metal floor behind him. The mother's voice was low and rough. She said something in her own tongue, a sentence meant only for her child. But even without understanding the words, Evan knew the meaning. It was the same thing he'd heard whispered in refugee camps across 100 worlds. Why would a human help us? Every day without fail the next morning, Evan wasn't sure if they would still be there. Sometimes the ones hiding in the shadows disappeared overnight, taken away, or worse. Still, he carried a fresh meal in his pack as he walked through the misty corridors of the spaceport. He slowed near the storage bay. At first, he saw nothing. The crates were in their usual place, the air thick with the smell of oil and coolant. Then, a faint cough. Soft, almost too quiet to hear. Evan moved closer, peering into the narrow space behind a line of metal containers. There they were, the same alien woman and her daughter huddled together, eyes alert. The girl, Miri, was chewing on something dry and stale, her face scrunched with discomfort. When she saw Evan, her expression changed. She sat up straighter, her eyes locking on the small pack in his hand. Evan knelt, unzipping the bag. He pulled out a warm food wrap and a bottle of clean water. The girl's mouth fell open slightly, but this time she didn't rush forward. She glanced at her mother first, not the mother. Selra stared at Evan for a long moment. Her silver-blue skin seemed dull under the dim lighting. Her voice, when she spoke, was slow and careful, as if testing the weight of each word. "You came back." Her common tone was rough but understandable. "I said I would," Evan replied simply. He placed the food in front of him and stepped back. Selra let Miri take it. The girl ate quickly, but not as desperately as the night before. When she finished, she wiped her mouth and without thinking gave Evan a small, shy smile. Evan felt something tighten in his chest. That became the routine. Every day, after his shift moving cargo, he would stop by their hiding spot. Sometimes he brought warm soup, other times bread, dried fruit, or even small chocolate squares when he could get them. Selra never asked for anything, but she always made sure Miri ate first. Evan noticed changes. The girl began to talk more quietly, always looking to her mother for permission. Selra's posture softened when he arrived, though her eyes still scanned the area for threats. One evening, while he was handing over food, a merchant he knew from the docks stopped him. The man's voice was low. "You should be careful, Cross. There's talk of syndicate trackers in the port. They're sniffing around for a woman and a child." Evan's stomach sank. The Threx Syndicate. He'd heard enough about them slavers who didn't care about borders or laws. If Selra and Miri were who he suspected, they were in more danger than he'd imagined. When he returned to the storage bay, he didn't mention the warning. But his eyes lingered on the shadows behind them, searching for movement. 2 nights later, he found proof. He was halfway to their spot when he noticed that marks, deep scratches gouged into the metal wall near the crates. 4 long curved lines, claw marks, and fresh. He crouched down, tracing them with his fingers. His mind flashed to the Syndicate's trackers. Some of them weren't fully human, or fully anything. They could smell fear. They could follow it. When? He reached the hiding place. Selra and Miri were there, but their eyes were sharp, restless. Even Miri stayed close to her mother, not reaching for the food immediately. Evan lowered his voice. "You see anyone?" Selra hesitated. "Yes," she said finally. Tall, long claws, watching. Evan's jaw tightened. He handed her the food anyway, but his mind was already racing. He could keep bringing meals, but food wouldn't stop the Syndicate. Sooner or later, someone would find them. As he turned to leave, Miri's voice followed him, soft and uncertain. "You come tomorrow?" Evan stopped. He looked back at her, those wide, trusting eyes, the faint smile that she didn't show anyone else. "Yeah," he said, "tomorrow." But in his mind, he knew the truth. Tomorrow might already be too late. Asterisk. The past they hide Evan came earlier than usual the next day. The storage bay was quiet, too quiet. The smell of oil and burned circuits hung in the air. He stopped before turning the corner to their hiding spot. Voices. He pressed himself against the wall. Selra's voice was low and urgent, speaking in her own language. Miri answered in a whisper, her tone tight with fear. Evan stepped out slowly, letting them see him. Selra's eyes widened, but she didn't tell him to leave. He set the food down, But neither of them reached for it. They were here again, Selra said in rough common tongue. Not human. Syndicate tracker. Looking for us. Evan crouched beside them. You need to tell me why. I can't help if I don't know what's going on. Selra's gaze was cold at first, as if weighing his worth. Then she sighed. Her story came slowly. She had lived on a mining colony, far out in the fringe worlds, a place owned by the Threx Syndicate. The workers, human, alien, it didn't matter, were little more than slaves. Families were kept in check by threats to their children. Selra's mate had worked the heavy diggers. One day, an explosion ripped through the mine. The Syndicate claimed it was sabotage and executed 3 workers as an example. Her mate was one of them. She paused, her hands clenching around Miri's shoulders. They said I was next, she whispered. I took her and ran. Evan listened without interrupting. He knew the Syndicate's reach. They didn't forget. And they didn't forgive escapees. If they were here in the port, it meant they were close to finding her. Why here? He asked. There are safer stations. Places they might not look. Selra gave a bitter smile. No place is safe from Threx. Here, I hide among the noise. Too many faces, too many ships. Her smile faded. But they are closing in. Miri, silent till now, pulled something from her ragged bag, a small carved stone shaped like a bird. She held it out to Evan. My papa made this, she said softly. He said birds are free. They can't be caught. Evan took the stone in his palm. It was warm from her hands. He didn't know why, but it made his throat tighten. You keep it, he said, giving it back. Your papa was right. That night, Evan stayed longer than usual. He showed Miri how to adjust a thermal blanket so it trapped more heat. He slipped Selra an extra pack of water filters, hard to find in the port without questions. Before leaving, he scanned the shadows. Again. Nothing moved, but the feeling in his gut was heavy. Hours later, in a different part of the port, a cloaked figure walked through a dim alley. Its claws scraped against the wall, leaving deep marks. It stopped when it reached a comm panel. A distorted voice spoke into the device. They are here. The mother and the child, and the human. The next morning, Evan woke to find a message on his datapad. No sender. Just 4 words. You can't save them. Asterisk the day of the chase. The rain came early to the port that day. It wasn't real rain just. The cold condensation from the station vents dripping through the steel grates above, but it made the walkways slick and the air heavy. Evan's boots splashed as he made his way to the storage bay. He was carrying 2 packs of food this time, 1 in each hand. He had a bad feeling in his gut dot when he reached their hiding spot. Selra and Miri were already waiting. Selra's eyes were sharp, scanning the corridor every few seconds. Miri clung to her mother's arm, not speaking. They were here again, Selra said before he could ask. Closer this time. Evan opened his mouth to reply. Then a sound cut through the port noise. A sharp, metallic ping, followed by the low growl of an engine. He froze. Selra's head snapped toward the sound. From the far end of the docking lane, 2 tall shapes appeared, moving with slow, deliberate steps. The first was a Syndicate tracker, its long claws scraping against the floor with every stride. The second was a bulky guard with armored plates across his chest and a blaster at his hip. They found us, Selra whispered. Evan didn't think. Move, he said. He grabbed Miri's hand and pulled her into the narrow maintenance tunnel. Behind the crates, Selra followed, her breathing fast but silent. The tunnel was dark, the smell of grease and rust filling the air. Evan knew every turn. He had worked here for years, but the Syndicate knew how to hunt. Their footsteps echoed behind them. Getting louder. At the end of the tunnel, Evan kicked open a small hatch. They spilled out into the outer docks, where a handful of cargo workers were unloading crates from a freighter. Evan waved at one of them, a friend named Rico, who hesitated but nodded. Without a word, Rico dropped a large cargo net over the tunnel entrance just as the syndicate trackers reached it, buying them precious seconds. They moved fast across the dock, weaving between stacks of containers. Selra kept Miri close, her hand gripping the girl's shoulder. Evan led them toward an old freight lift. Halfway there, a shout rang out. One of the guards had spotted them. A warning shot blasted past, scorching the metal floor. "Keep running," Evan barked. The lift's doors were half-rusted, but Evan jammed the controls until they groaned open. They stepped inside, and the doors clanged shut just as the trackers reached the platform. Evan hit the lowest level on the panel. The lift shuddered, then began its slow descent. In the dim light, Miri looked up at him. "Are we safe now?" Evan glanced at Selra. Her face was calm, but her eyes told the truth. "No," she said quietly. "They won't stop." The lift reached the bottom level, an empty maintenance bay that hadn't been used in years. Dust coated the floor, and the air smelled stale. Evan led them to a small side room with a door that locked from the inside. It wasn't much, but it would buy them time. Selra placed a hand on his arm. "Why do you help us?" she asked. "You risk yourself for us." Evan didn't answer right away. He thought of the war, of the people he hadn't been able to save, of the little girl in one refugee camp who never made it past the first winter. "Because someone should," he said finally. Outside, the sound of footsteps grew closer again. Heavy, slow. The syndicate had found their trail. Evan checked the old service map on the wall. There was one way out through the storm-drained tunnels that led to the far edge of the port. It would be dangerous, but it was their only chance. He turned to Selra. "This ends today. You can't keep hiding here." Selra looked at Miri, then back at him. "Where would we go?" Evan's voice was steady. "My home. Far from here. You'll be safe." The offer, the banging on the door, didn't stop. Metal groaned under each hit, the old hinges shuddering. Dust fell from the ceiling in thin streams. I clung to her mother's arm, eyes wide. Selra's hand stayed on the girl's shoulder, but her breathing was quick and uneven. Evan was already pulling out a small datapad and an old keycard. "Once they get in, this room won't save us," he said. "There's a tunnel under the drainage grate outside. It leads to the old launch bays. If we can reach my ship." Selra shook her head. "You said you're home. What does that mean?" Evan looked at her directly. "It means I take you both with me. Off this station, to a place the syndicate won't bother coming." She stared at him like she was trying to read the truth in his face. "You would do this? For us?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "You've been running too long. And Miri." He glanced at the little girl, who was watching him silently. "She deserves more than hiding in dark corners." Selra's jaw tightened. "You understand what that means? If they find you, they will not just kill you. They will make you suffer first." Evan almost smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I've been through worse." The banging grew louder. Something sharp punched through the door, one of the trackers, claws curling back with a screech of metal. Miri whimpered. Selra looked down at her daughter, then back at Evan. "You have no reason to care for us," she said softly. Her voice was almost breaking. "No reason, but you do." Evan stepped closer. "Maybe because I've seen this before. Families torn apart. People left to die because no one wanted to get involved. I'm not letting that happen again." Outside, the heavy footsteps shifted. Evan knew they were positioning to break the lock in one strike. He pulled a small pistol from under his jacket and checked the power cell. Not much charge left, but it would buy them a little time. "We have one chance," he said. "If you say yes, I'll get you out. Both of you. Tonight." Selra hesitated. Then, Neri's small hand reached out and touched Evan's. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Can we go?" That was all it took. Selra nodded once sharp final. Yes, Evan moved fast. He kicked open the back panel of the room, revealing a narrow shaft leading down to the drainage tunnels. The air was damp and smelled of rust and old water. "Go," he told them. Selra climbed down first, helping Miri follow. Evan dropped in, last sealing the hatch above them. The banging on the door was replaced by the sound of it finally breaking open. Voices shouted above, then the heavy crash of boots as the Syndicate trackers entered the empty room. The tunnel was low, forcing them to crouch. Water splashed under their boots. Evan kept his voice low as they moved. "There's a maintenance hatch near the outer hull. From there, we get to my ship." Selra said nothing, but she stayed close, one hand always on Miri. They could hear. Movement above the Syndicate wasn't giving up. The sound of claws dragging along the pipes made the space feel smaller, the air heavier. Finally, a faint glow appeared ahead. The exit hatch. Evan reached it and swiped his keycard. The lock clicked, and cold air from the dockside rushed in. He turned to them. "From here we run. No stopping." Selra gave a sharp nod. Miri tightened her grip on her mother's hand. Asterisk a home. At last the hatch door creaked open. Cold, damp air swept in from the docks, carrying the metallic tang of ship fuel. But Evan didn't have time to breathe it in, because the shadow was already moving at the far end of the dock. A Syndicate tracker stood in their path. Its claws glinted under the harsh lights, curved and razor-sharp. It tilted its head slowly, its eyes locking on Miri. "Run?" Evan said. They sprinted. Evan stayed at the rear, his pistol drawn, covering them as Selra pulled Miri toward the loading platforms. The tracker moved with unnatural speed, each step echoing like a hammer on metal. Evan fired once. The shot struck the wall near the tracker's head, sparks showering down. It barely slowed. Selra shoved Miri behind a stack of crates and turned, her silver-blue eyes fierce. In her hands, she gripped a broken metal pipe she had grabbed from the tunnel floor. The tracker lunged. Selra swung with all her strength, the pipe slamming into its shoulder. The creature hissed and staggered back. Evan was there in an instant. Firing again, this time hitting its leg. It dropped to one knee, claws scraping against the dock floor. "Move!" Evan shouted. They ran again, weaving between ships and containers until they reached a small, battered shuttle docked near the far wall. It wasn't much to look at patchy hull, old engine plates, but it was Evan's, and it could fly. He opened the hatch and pushed Selra and Miri inside. Then he hit the controls to seal it. The tracker's screech echoed through the dock as it limped toward them. A second figure appeared at the far entrance, another Syndicate hunter, heavier, carrying a blaster. Evan didn't wait. He jumped into the pilot's seat and powered up the engines. The shuttle trembled, lights flickering, before the thrusters roared. To life, the hunters broke into a sprint as the ship lifted from the dock. A blaster shot grazed the hull, leaving a burning mark. Evan didn't look back. He gunned the engines, shooting out of the port into open space. The chase wasn't over. A Syndicate patrol ship detached from the station, its engines flaring as it gave pursuit. "Hold on." Evan called out. He threw the shuttle into a sharp turn, skimming close to the jagged asteroid belt, just outside the station's orbit. The patrol ship followed, weaving between massive chunks of rock. A warning alarm blared in the cockpit target lock. Evan's hands moved fast over the controls, his jaw set. At the last second, He dove between two spinning asteroids, forcing the larger ship to adjust its path. It was a mistake. The Syndicate vessel clipped the edge of a rock, tearing part of its wing clean off. Selra watched from the passenger seat, eyes wide. "You know how to fly." Evan smirked despite the tension. "Used to be in the service. Comes in handy." Minutes later, the patrol ship was gone from the sensors. Silence filled the shuttle, except for the low hum of the engines. Miri finally relaxed, curling into her mother's arms. Evan didn't speak until the blue and green curve of a planet filled the cockpit window. His voice softened. "This is it. My home." The shuttle touched down on a quiet stretch of farmland, far from the nearest town. The air outside was clean, cool, carrying the smell of grass and soil. The house ahead was small, but its windows glowed warmly in the twilight. Selra stepped out first, Miri holding her hand. For a moment, they both just stood there, looking at the horizon like they didn't quite believe they were safe. "This place," Selra said quietly. "It feels different." Evan nodded. "No syndicate, no patrols. Just people who want to be left alone." Miri's eyes lit up when she saw the small vegetable garden by the house. "Can we stay?" she asked, almost breathless. Evan knelt in front of her. "You can stay as long as you want. This is your home now." Selra looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder, a gesture of deep trust in her culture. "Thank you, Evan Cross, for giving us more than food." Evan smiled faintly. "For giving you a home?" Selra's gaze softened. "For giving us hope." That night, the small house glowed under a sky filled with stars. Inside, the sound of quiet laughter drifted through the warm room's laughter that hadn't been heard in a long time. And for the first time in months, all three of them slept without fear. Asterisk.